name is Jeanette Landstedt, and I've painted the winner of this Portuguese prize this year. The winner was Jude Ray.
Welcome to today's episode of Coffee Break, and today I'm here at the home of Jeanette Landstedt and Chris Downie. Now they're both artists. I have to tell you the story of how I met Jeanette. I was filming at the Paul Shigeach Memorial Art Prize 2008, and I'm a bit of a chatter, and I ran into another woman who was a bit of a chatter, and I said to my new friend, "Do you know any artists that are in the exhibition?" And she said, "Yes, my very dear friend Jeanette has a portrait in the exhibition." So I said, "Would you ask your friend if it would be all right if I interviewed her?" So after the presentation and the award, I very briefly interviewed Jeanette. And I had to say that I do love her artwork. So she's invited me here to her house today for lunch. But before we have lunch, we're going to have a little tour of her studio.
This studio is about 120 square meters large, which is a good space here in Sydney. And I share it with my partner Chris Downie. He's got that side of the studio, and I've got this side over here. And that way we've got enough space, we can do whatever we like on our sides without interfering on each other. Sometimes we overlap, of course, on different projects when you have large things you're working on, for example. Originally I came to Australia approximately 25 years ago, and I absolutely fell in love with the country and its people, and decided that this was going to be the place where I wanted to do my formal art studies. I've been working, I've been an artist basically ever since I was a child, and I just happened to be one of those kids that never gave up. I just continued. I've always been working and doing things, creative things basically. So I was accepted into what was called, in those days what was called Alexander Mackey's College, but that same year they changed and became a degree course, and it eventually ended up with the name COFA, College of Fine Arts. So I spent approximately 6 years altogether studying, and I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts, and I did a postgraduate studies at COFA, and then I did a Diploma of Education. I only worked as a teacher for a couple of terms and decided it wasn't quite my thing, although I really highly respect teaching as a job, and but I think as a full-time artist, basically, it tended to drain my energies, my creative energies, teaching. So I do part-time work in other fields, and I've done a lot of different kind of things over the years. You become a little bit of you have to do everything basically in order to get a part-time job, just to support what I call my addiction, which is painting. Or creative arts of any sort. I call myself a creative artist because I do a lot of different things. I work in photography. I did my postgraduate, for example, was multimedia, where I also did things like video. I did everything on video, but I also did painting, and nowadays anyway, I tend to mix a lot of photograph into my paintings, and I think that's become a little bit of a signature of mine now. And I also apart from my portraits, which is approximately probably a third to a half, 50% of my creative output, I also do a lot of space paintings. I'm very interested in anything that has to do with space, and anything that has to do with that field of exploration of our world. And this is one of my larger paintings that I've done, and I've done it on several panels because I wanted to look a bit like a map. We've got Earth down there, which is a collage, and my portrait of Jude, for example, had a star map behind her, if you remember that one. But anyway, yeah, so 6 years of college work, and then I went out in the world here in Australia to continue my art exploration. And I spent about, shortly after finishing college, I went to live in Orange in the hinterlands. And I was up there for about 10 years. And I just decided that wasn't quite right for me. So I came back to Sydney, and I came back approximately 10 years ago now. And Chris and I met up, and we've been doing a lot of things together over the years, several different exhibitions, etc. And we have, I think the space is one of our meeting points when it comes to artwork, because Chris tends to do a lot of spaceships and aliens and things like that. I'm the science part of the whole equation, and Chris is more like the fiction. So we got a science fiction team here.
My name's Chris Downie, and I share this studio with Jeanette, and I've been painting all my life. I was originally trained at the National Art School at East Sydney Tech, and then I did a master's degree in England, and then I did further postgraduate study in New York. When I came back to Australia, which was in the very end of the 70s, I started teaching at the then art school, which went through a number of different incarnations, and then became eventually College of Fine Arts, University of New South Wales. And I taught painting and drawing and experimental art forms there for 20 years. And when I couldn't take teaching and I couldn't take the academic world any longer, I resigned. And I got a job as a consultant to the Australia Council, and went up to north into Darwin, and I was working in Darwin and then all over the north in the tropical zones, and I sort of fell in love with that area, and I was up there for about 10 years or so. But it was while I was up there and travelling around that I had various experiences in Central Australia that made me think about, maybe there's other people there or something like that anyway. And when I came back to Sydney after all that, I just decided I wasn't going to work at all, I was going to paint full time. I joined the UFO Research Society, and eventually became a member of the board, and got to meet all the people in Australia who had experiences with aliens, experiences with UFOs, and I interviewed them all and looked at all these people couldn't photograph what happened to them, which is the strange thing, but they did drawings, and their drawings I thought were very, very interesting. They really sort of inspired me. And so eventually I got to know everyone in Australia who had anything to do with UFOs and aliens, or did drawings of them, and arranged an exhibition for Liverpool Museum called UFOs over Liverpool, which was a big success, and I was interviewed by American television and all that sort of stuff. My own work, I've sort of gone on a more whimsical kind of, imaginary kind of line. This painting I'm working on at the moment is called the Intergalactic Explorers Club. As you can see, there's an element of irony and humour there. I love painting UFOs flying over sort of Australian iconic landscapes like the Olgas or the Devil's Marbles or Ayers Rock, because a lot of people who believe in UFOs believe there's a huge war going on in Central Australia between the aliens and the American government with their secret bases. I mean, I don't actually believe that, but a lot of people do. I like, if you look at that one up there, I like sort of doing kind of traditional kind of landscape or cloudscapes, and then put a whack a UFO in it, sort of thing, Yeah, that one down the end of the studio down there, which I'm still working on, that one's called I Wish You Were Here. And the idea is that there's two alien buddies, and there's sort of like an alien landscape there, and it's kind of like a postcard. I actually started out how I started all this was I talked to people who had met aliens, right? And I started doing these little paintings from their descriptions of the type of people they met, and I did hundreds of these. Well, that's an interesting one. But now it's become a sort of like a huge fantasy world that I'm making up, you know. Like this is a rough. This is one I'm about to start, which I've done a number of sort of smaller works, and it's called "Of All the Gin Joints in All the Bars." You know.
Yes, well, these are different phenomena that happens in the universe, basically. Like this here is what they jokingly called is the birth of. It's one part of the universe where you have birth of stars, and it's just massive cloud formations and gas formations, and there's like almost like ovaries, you know. There's stars bursting out from this formation here. And this is like the Milky Way. These are like Milky Way. But I have also made different star formations that we have here in here. It is a bit like the sun, looking at the sun, but it's actually a nebula. It's the Eye Nebula. It's called the Eye Nebula. And I've also integrated other things like different planets and different star formations all over the place. This is like looking at the sun head on, and this is the moon here, and down here we got Earth, and the Earth is made up out of collaged pieces I get from all over the place. Different. In this case, I've used different cutouts from magazines, etc., and then I've painted over it. Spiral galaxy here. And this is just a galaxy that you see from the side. And actually this is what our galaxy would look like if we had a look at it from the side. And I mean, actually what we see from Earth of our own galaxy, the Milky Way for example, is just one arm of a big galaxy that looks like that. This particular painting had been made on small panels, because I wanted it to look a bit like it's a big star map, a big map, so you get those lines. It tends to be something that is done a lot nowadays. People are painting on smaller panels in order to make them into large paintings, and that has a lot to do with transport, for example. It's a lot easier to transport a painting that is in a pile, you know, like that, rather than this size. This is just very heavy, very difficult to transport.
I'm just starting this one, and the idea is this sort of lost city here. It's sort of, like a lot of people think there's these ruins on Mars. I'm a bit obsessed with Mars too. I sort of tune into Mars every day to get the feedback from the rovers, you know. And, you know, a lot of people believe we're that head, that face on Mars. A lot of people believe there's a ruined city around it. Anyone calls it the ruined city anyway. This is my idea of the ruined city. And I'm about to add these figures here, so everything's a bit in flux at the moment, you know. I'm starting a whole new series too called Sources Over Sydney, which I'm going to have sources flying over kind of Sydney landmarks. And this is the first one. I've got the Queen Victoria building and the post office clock. Now these are just started. I've just drawn them up, and I'm about to put the UFOs in them, you know. So I guess that explains what I'm about, really.
What about the one behind it? I love that, the clock.
Yeah, the clock. That's the old post office clock that they finally restored after taking it down during the Second World War. And it's going to have a flying saucer over it, so Sources Over Sydney. I got the idea from a work I did. I used to have a studio in Chippendale, and there was an old building there, and I did a painting at the top of it, and I put a saucer in it. It looked fantastic, so yeah. This is a continuation. This guy's popping up in a lot of paintings. He's a kind of everyman alien sort of thing, and he's sort of a bit of a sad sack figure. I guess it's a sort of representation of myself as an alien, and he's in this. It's called The Idea. It's the two. You know, that's what the light bulb, you know, he's got an idea, maybe I'm an alien. But now I've decided to put an alien cat in it too. I'm getting more kitsch all the time, you know. And I don't know if it's an ageing process or what, you know.
So have you had any UFO experiences personally?
No, I'd like to. You know, I've spent nights out with people, you know, waiting for them, and sort of, you know, there's a lot going on in Australia. I mean, there's a huge movement. Australia's got some of the most famous UFO sightings in the world, you know, and you know, the Min lights, and there's lots of within the Aboriginal community, there's lots of talk about sort of these sorts of things, which interests me a lot. I'm more interested in the spiritual side of the UFOs and the actual, you know, they're coming here to conquer Earth or something like that. Well, I enjoy that too, but I believe it's a kind of spiritual thing, you know. It's sort of like a white man's dreaming, you know, white fella dreaming, I call it, you know, sort of. So it's a technological twist on an ancient myth, you know. And aliens are the same thing as trolls or fairies or witches. They're something we've made up that we need to have, you know. Have you ever met an alien, or?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
There's some pretty alien people.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people now they call themselves star children, who believe that they're the progeny of a congress between aliens and humans, you know. There's quite a few of them in Australia. That's when I actually lost interest in being part of the UFO movement. I couldn't hack that star children stuff, you know. There's all these women coming along and saying, oh yes, my child's a star child. It's very special, you know. I thought, well, they're all special, aren't they? I mean, you know, my kids are special. I mean, anyway. These are all based on me talking to people and saying, you know, what did you see? So basically they're all called what did you see? Or who did you see? And also I collected a lot of stuff over the net too. You know, there's so much, like if you just sort of put up aliens or... But I like this idea of the formal alien in the suit and the, you know, tie, kind of the business type alien. And these two here, I'm not sure about them, they're a bit of a worry. This particular one, that's called, that particular ship is called an Adamski. It's a particular type of flying saucer, first identified by this guy called Adamski, who said that he worked at the main telescope in California, which he did, of course, but he sold hot dogs, you know. But that swept the world in the early 50s, the Adamskis, everyone was seeing them, you know, so I don't know if it's what to do with the Cold War or something. Yeah, so that's it, really.
Chris, thanks for taking me on a tour of your artwork. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, thanks.
Do you ever sell any of them?
Well, sometimes. I used to sell a lot of stuff, but not since I've been doing this. Now, when I first got back to Sydney after studying overseas, I was with Macquarie Galleries because, and I was working on a whole series of the Harbour Bridge, and you know, every Harbour Bridge painting I did just sold. So, but there's only so many paintings you can do with the Harbour Bridge. But eventually, I moved into other things, and I actually moved into a whole thing of performance and installation art and video art and collaborative. I'm still very much into collaborative art. I really like working with other people. I think that's a big thing, but I haven't got a gallery at the moment. But I think I could sell them eventually.
This painting hung at Macquarie University's science show, the Year of Physics Art Prize, and it's also it's a science, obviously science painting. I have a couple of Russian, what do you call it? Russian. Sputniks. I was going to say Sputniks, yeah. And actually the painting is called Seeding because in the middle here is an egg, and it's something that could be a chicken. It could also be a alien, I suppose, if you wanted to. But it's dealing with the fact that this is how life was transformed and transported in the universe. you know, in small molecules and small bits and pieces. I also have quite a bit of texture in this painting. So I built up texture here to give it more of a feel of movement from different planetary things falling around the place. This painting is a portrait I made a few years ago of Chris Downie, my partner, and I call it Chris, Where's Your Head? He had just started doing all his aliens, so I used a lot of his aliens as his friends in space, basically. And the reason why the head is loose like that is really because I see it as a image that's been transformed or transported, really. The image of the face has been transported via the universe by something like a laser or something like that. So that's why it hasn't got a body, it's just the face itself. So it's a bit of fun again, and we've got small planets. This planet here is actually made from an image of a golf ball stuck on. So I'm using photographs and mixing photographs with paint all the time. So little things like that. And then I might even paint into it a little bit to give it more rounded shape or like the aliens, for example. These images here were I took photos of Chris's paintings, and then I cut them out and stuck them onto the canvas and mixed it with paint. So I quite often do that. I have cut out images that I put into paintings, and sometimes it's prints, sometimes it's photographs, and yeah. So it's a whole. I just like mixing things, you know, mixing and matching and making images.
This is the whole thing again about the idea of these ruins on Mars that supposedly have been discovered. So I used the Martian landscape, which I sort of downloaded from one of the rovers, and I added a kind of strange looking architectural thing, and then a couple of aliens. It's called Honeymoon on Mars. I really like the way that the Martian landscape looks so much like Australian outback landscape too. I like those sort of the way that they interact like that.
I jokingly say that it's really a portrait of Chris and me, you know, and obviously I'm the one in pink. I'm the pink alien.
Yeah. It's funny, I sent an image of this to my daughter in London, and she put it on a whole lot of mugs. So.
I've got a very exciting project happening next year. I'm in the process of arranging a art show in Stockholm, Sweden, for the Harmony group. That's the group of Australian and overseas international artists that we've been showing together now for about 3 years, I think it is, approximately. So that's going to be good fun to go to my hometown and bring some of these artworks with me. Looking forward to that very much.
What's your hometown?
Stockholm, Sweden. Yes.
Jeanette, it's been a real treat being here today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It was lovely to have you over.